Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for another edition of Raising Vibration Radio and Journey into Consciousness. I am your host, Reverend Raven, and I'd like to introduce our second host, Tammy Lucente.
Good evening, everybody.
And we have a special guest with us tonight. We have Tom Coates, that cosmic tourist, that traveler, the channeler that can see things. We have him right here tonight. We're so proud and blessed that he's here with us. Say hi, Tom.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Your enthusiasm. Killing me.
I can't help myself. It's a great Memorial Day weekend, and we're all here together, and sharing the joys and pleasures of life. And isn't life just awesome?
Yeah, it's a kick.
It's a kick. Pretty stinking wet now.
Yeah,
just remember
today.
Yeah, well, just remember, you chose to come down here right now at this very time. You chose to be here in this lifetime.
That's right.
So that's right.
Yeah, so what are your thoughts on that? Just that one statement alone, Mr. Coates.
Thoughts on what?
That you chose to be right here, right now, at this very moment in time.
Well, I think we all did that, and I think the moment we're all in here is pretty special because we're in the crosshairs of one of those Yogi Berra moments, when you get to the fork in the road, take it, and where certain things we do, if we do them right, will work out well for us, and if we do them the wrong way, they will not work out well. In terms, if we value survival of our species and so forth,
Exactly.
And so that's where we are, and I think many of us have chosen to be here now to help that process.
Well, that's great. So you're in South Carolina tonight, right?
No, I'm in North Carolina.
Oh, North Carolina.
Right.
Tell me.
I'm in the Outer Banks of North Carolina.
Ah, like Nag's Head and stuff like that?
Nag's Head. Exactly where
like
I am.
Nag's Head.
Oh, okay. So I got married in Beaufort, North Carolina. It's an Outer Bank island too, as well, back in the 80s a long time ago.
Right.
In divorce court. So anyway, my question is, what is it like there? I mean, is the mask law still in effect there? Like, down here in Florida, no more masks are needed. Everything's open and free and clear to go. What about there?
Down in Florida, I don't think masks were ever needed, were they?
Oh, boy, we had them. Trust me, we had them.
For maybe 2 or 3 weeks. Anyway, masks are, from what I saw this afternoon, not required anymore down here, and it seemed to me on the way down here today that in places I stopped, maybe 60-70% of the people, or even more, were wearing masks.
Yeah.
And others of us were not. So.
Right, but what you were really talking about, I mean, when you said at this time, some of us feel very compelled or being very active, and what were you pointing at, Tom, at this time? You were talking more about globally, correct?
Yeah, I was talking more about globally. I think we've got a variety of issues that are related to the relatively limited state of consciousness of humanity at this point in time, and so those issues relate to the pandemic has been one recent issue, and you see that being played out in different ways across the globe. Some countries have done well with the pandemic, others have not. China, for a large country, has done better than anyone else in terms of their ability to act in unison to control the spread of the pandemic and so forth. And the issue has been politicized in unfortunate ways in the United States, and that has cut against the uh, the effectiveness of our responsiveness to it, and also our medical our healthcare system has been challenged. Not so much, I think, due to its the amount of available healthcare we have, but because of the way it is structured, and the way it is structured is has been challenged uh, by the pandemic, and weaknesses have shown up. And this has been the same in across Europe and so forth, to a lesser extent than here. Um, but the pandemic is just one aspect of this. You know, we have islands of plastic bags in the Pacific Ocean. We have across the South Pacific, we have species of birds that are going extinct because they're eating plastic, because they're attracted to the bright, shiny aspects of it, and they cannot. When these birds die, they're cut open. They're found to have their whole stomachs are filled with plastic, bits of plastic, um, and and so we are. There is a die-off of species going on planet Earth now that only has been equaled uh, around 250 million years ago, when there was a dramatic shift in climate. The Permian, I can't remember the name of the age that began then, but something like 90% of all life on Earth died, and much more so than died at 65 million years ago when the dinosaurs died. And we are in the midst of one of those epochs right now, and all the evidence suggests that most of it is being created by our immature way of dealing with our environment and fellow beings on the planet. So, as I have said a number of times, you know, this will test whether the human experiment on Earth will continue or not. And in the scheme of things, species come and go, and there's no reason why ours should last forever. But it's only been around for a much shorter time than most every other species on Earth. And if we succeed in destroying our habitat, um, in the near future, we will certainly we will be we can be congratulated for coming and going more quickly than most any other species that ever lived on the planet.
Well, you know, you've been involved in the spiritual community, if you will, for a great many years. Like actively on some level, I'd say 20, 30 years at least, right?
Well, I would say most of my life.
Yeah, but in larger groups or stuff. I was thinking, anyways, would you say from that experience that you've noticed people becoming more aware or not any more aware? Or...
Well, I think there has been a great increase in awareness, and I'm having a hard time lining up with the camera on this thing.
Yeah, I know it's difficult.
I think there's been a lot of increase, and I would, in Tammy, in terms of your question there about how long I've been involved, from my perspective, it's been a lifelong journey. Yeah. It's been in the last 35 years or so that I have started to go more public.
Time.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear him fine.
Can you pause for a minute?
Sure.
All right, try to talk again. There was a major drag in it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, maybe the internet is unstable here.
Yeah, a little bit. So for the last 45 years, you said?
No, I was saying for the last 35 to 40 years, I've become more public with it.
Yeah.
I've been more engaged with others in endeavors intended to specifically intended to raise consciousness. on the planet.
And that's kind of what I was pointing to, because
Mhm.
I was curious as to whether or not, in those years of being a little more public, and if you've noticed a significant vamping up or not, would people coming from a spiritual place, so to speak, and assisting in this process of the earth.
Very much so. Very
Yeah.
much so. And I think that's very important. And the by guidance that I've gotten, the number of people on Earth today who are consciously involved in a process intended by them to move the needle forward in terms of expanding human consciousness and so forth
Mm-hmm.
is in the range of 500 million. 500 million people, which would translate to uh, one what 1/15 of the population of the planet, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so the more that may well be a critical mass that's needed if those 500 million people were organized in a way that was connecting their intentions with each other.
Yeah.
So there are significant numbers of people that are involved in the movement, if you will, and and it's not, we've spent several weeks talking about the Michael teachings and the
Mm-hmm.
levels of the soul ages and so forth, and I mean, for instance, what I was talking about a few minutes ago with the environmental issues. These are specifically mature soul issues. These are issues that will be addressed and are being addressed from the perspective of mature soul consciousness within the framework of the Michael teachings,
Mm-hmm.
And they're important because they are fairly critical to our survival. There also are issues relating to use of weapons that could destroy us and so forth. And those, notwithstanding that we spent 40 plus years in an arms race with the Soviet Union, um, uh, the issue of nuclear weapons is still very much with us. And we have other weapons that have been created in the last 30 years that are perhaps just as devastating as nuclear weapons, and that are not even known to the general public. So, I don't know. I'm not really in a position to make a judgment as to the extent to which we're at risk on those things. But we have not. The risk is not behind us; it's still with us. That's the point I'm making.
So for people who don't know, maybe it would be a nice time to get a little background on your background. What do you think? No?
Okay with me.
So where shall we start?
Well, I was born, and like most of us, I was not immaculately conceived, and
I think you were.
Not in this lifetime, anyway.
Parents by their first name.
Yes,
Perhaps
anybody that can call their parents by the first name is not of this planet. I'm sorry, you were hatched.
Anyways,
that's I appreciate your humor there.
Welcome to Tammy's hell.
No, that is I used to get a lot of criticism, although as a child, I was not only calling my own parents by their first names, I was calling all the parents of everybody I knew by their first name. And when all my friends were saying Mr. This and Miss That or Doctor This and so forth, and I was saying Bob and Bill and John and and looking back on it, it seems a little bit strange now, but at the time, no one even blinked. It was just the way things were, and and um, so I didn't. I didn't. It wasn't odd for me at the time, and it worked for me, even though it never. I was wondering when my own children were born whether that would be repeated by them, and it didn't happen. I wasn't, I wasn't disappointed. I wouldn't have been disappointed either way. I was just interested to see whether something like that would happen. But it seemed that in all cases, the natural first words were what they were for most kids. They just didn't happen that be that way for me. And
Yeah, not mom, not dad, but Bob and Jill or whatever.
yeah,
I'm sorry,
Billy and Nanny in my case.
Billy and Annie. And
Nanny.
not only that, but your friends' parents. That just blows my mind, and they accepted that from you. I mean, it's
Yeah, there was never any issue of disrespect or anything like that. None at
Yeah.
all.
that
So,
means you must have been vibrating at a higher vibration than they were, and like even though you were a child, they must have felt like you were more on adult level to commingle with them on a first name basis like that.
I never thought of it that way, but I'm not going to say that's wrong. I just don't know. I was a very I felt as a child growing up very challenged by various issues like severe shyness and being a stutterer and so forth, and so it just didn't. The idea that I was just vibrating at a higher level was the furthest thing from my mind.
Yeah.
Um, and but I was having experiences as at a young age of like precognitive experiences and so forth, and and I've had those in one way or another throughout my life, and and so
Give us an example of just one childhood one.
the first one that I remember of any significance was one that was when I was 3 years old, and and we were living in a row house in the downtown, what is now the downtown area of Richmond, in a building that has been for many years uh, a part of VCU, and but in those days it was a private residence, and it was 1947, and my my father was lying out on a sofa in the living room reading a book, probably a Mickey Spillane or Earl Stanley Gardner, because he was a doctor and that's all he read other than medical books. Um, were those two authors? They were his favorites, and he didn't want to challenge himself too much with real good literature. And so anyway, and my mother had gone to a movie, and and I was running my little John Deere rubber tractor up and down my father's torso from the upper chest where his book was laid uh, down to his feet and back, and and uh, and as I was doing that, I started seeing visuals, and like almost like a movie, but they were sort of shorts, and then moved to like a if you see a preview on TV of a film that's coming out, you'll see a clip of this and a clip of that, and and that started getting my attention. I was running the tractor from the chest area here down to one foot, and then back, and then down to the other foot, and there was some. The truth be known, there was some tension between my parents, and uh, I didn't know details of it, but I was aware of it at the energetic level.
Mm-hmm.
And so this tractor business was a way of trying to help smooth that out for my dad, Billy. And so as I was doing it, as I said, I started seeing these visuals, and then they took my attention. I'd pull the tractor away, and they would disappear. And I put the tractor back, and then they would come back. And so I realized there was a connection between the contact with him and what I was seeing. And so what I was seeing was were scenes from what I was communicating in my mind back and forth with whoever was downloading this, um, and because I was even at that time accustomed to getting internal guidance on things,
Mm-hmm.
and so I was I was asking what was this, and I was what I was seeing was the marriage between my parents disintegrating, and I didn't know what I didn't have a word for that. I just saw the family coming apart, and I asked when is this, and the answer was 10 years, 10 years from now, and and so uh, it was it was uh, very interesting, and I was watching it as if I were an interested observer and nothing else, uh, and I observed too that everyone in the household, other than I, was being really terribly buffeted emotionally by this experience. Um, and and I asked about that. Why is it that I'm not being affected, or apparently not being affected in the same way that others in the family are, particularly well, parents were, and my younger brother was, all were very affected by it emotionally. And and the answer I got was, in ways that they are not aware of, that who you are is not dependent upon the family unit staying together.
Mm-hmm.
In language that was appropriate to a 3-year-old.
I get
And and so uh, anyway, I said, well, I asked then, should I uh, tell Billy and Nanny about this, my parents?
it. Mm-hmm.
And and the answer was very clear no. And then I asked why not, and the answer was, again, in 3-year-old uh, terminology, they're not old enough to know.
I know.
And which I understood to mean that they they just didn't have a way to process it. And so anyway, so by the time I was 3, I was already keeping secrets from my parents, and um, and that and that uh, disintegration did occur on schedule uh,
That's where I was gonna
10
go.
years later. So, that's an example, and there were many others as time went by.
Mm.
Um, another
So,
way,
do you feel like you raised your parents?
well, I wouldn't deny that.
Okay.
I mean, every parent learns from every child,
Right.
Mhm.
uh, but sometimes there is more of a reciprocity
Mhm.
between parent and child than other times, and probably there was a greater level than average in my case.
Gotcha.
Um,
So
the
you're having experiences like this very, very young, and
sorry,
you've been having experiences like that all your life, correct?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'll give you another example. When I was
Okay.
10 years old, um, I had uh, a real. My mother had lots of mental problems, and she was she was a wonderful person, but she had unfortunately had an event that occurred when she was a child that she never recovered from, and it marked her for life in very, very challenging ways.
Mm.
And she had a severe borderline personality disorder problem, and um, she had been diagnosed during her adult life as paranoid schizophrenic. Um, I have felt for the last 40 some years that was an incorrect diagnosis, but the borderline disorder was not understood at that time during the time when she was in the treatment pool. I don't know that it would have made any difference if it had been, but in any event, she was treated as if she was someone with schizophrenia. Looking back, I don't think she had, but borderline syndrome is no less challenging, and
Hmm.
and perhaps more so, and in terms of behavioral issues, and uh, and so um, I rem- I remember it was when I was 10, or maybe it was either my 10th or 11th birthday. I think it was my 11th, and there was a big uh, uh, brouhaha that occurred on my birthday, and and I got angry and left the house for 2 or 3 hours, walking around, just walking, um, and and it was my birthday's in June, so it was light outside. It was early evening, and and so at some point in the course of that walk for several miles that I did, uh, I asked, why isn't it that in my family we can't just have a bunch of alcoholics like in all my friends' families, where things can be simple and straightforward.
Oh yeah, that would be easy.
Like you would think that's simple and straightforward,
Right.
though.
Well,
I mean,
I
wow.
had a lot of friends whose mothers or fathers or both were in that category, and they would drink to excess and pass out on the kitchen floor, and we just carry them up to their rooms and be done with it. And and in my household, things were a little bit more complex than that, and so anyway, I asked that question. I got an immediate answer downloaded to me, and the answer was, this is what you have because this is what you chose. You chose your parents. You chose this level of complexity. You chose this level of dysfunction within the framework of your family environment in order to uh, have this experience to learn from and to be able to be helpful to others who have similar issues or different issues, whatever. And that moment was a real it was a real wake up call for me because it transformed me in that instant from
And
being a
how
victim.
old were you when that happened?
I think it was the day of my 11th birthday. It was either my 10th birthday or my 11th birthday, but one or the other. And it was um, because from that moment forward, I realized that I was not any victim of any of this, and uh, that this was something that that not only I had chosen, but that allowed me to realize that I could manage it, and I could understand it and navigate my way through it without being harmed by it.
Hmm.
And so So that was a big aha, big eureka moment for me. Um, and the I've read of lots of psychological studies that indicate that of the people who are in highly dysfunctional family environments, which most of us are to some degree or other,
Amen.
notwithstanding the face we put onto the world,
Mhm.
about 70% of them are very, very adversely affected. But the more interesting side of that is that 30% are not. So 30% of the people that are in those environments come out of it on the other side and are very highly functional and very highly productive and 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 uh, uh, and holistically complete people. And so that the fact that that occurs to me continues to reverberate in terms of that message I got that night. About choice that some of us make these soul level choices to have these challenging experiences because at the soul level, every experience is just that. It's just an experience,
Mhm.
and we have all sorts of things that occur to us at the physical level that we can carry the wounds of for long periods of time, and they can come up sometimes when we least expect it. But at the soul level, it's all just one experience after another, and every experience we have has value, no matter how unpleasant or traumatizing it may be.
Do you ever want to kick yourself in the pants for the life you chose?
No,
Oh, okay. Well, you're better than me.
no, no. You know, I no, I don't. I never thought. It never occurred to me that I was dumb for having made such bad choices. No, because what somehow, some way, the method that message was communicated to me sort of aligned me, even though didn't necessarily know it at the time, but it looking back on it retrospectively, it felt as if it aligned me with the consciousness of my soul, if that makes sense.
Right, it does.
And so I never thought about it. Oh, gee, why did I make such a dumb choice?
Mhm.
Or, you know, I just didn't think about that.
That's great. I mean, sometimes I understand exactly what you're saying, and it does align. And again, we're here to like witness things playing out. And earlier you mentioned, we do make choices, and it can either, depending on the choice that you make, it can go in your favor or it can take you down a whole different path. And then I guess a perspective plays a very important part of that. Is that correct?
Absolutely, it plays probably the most important part, our
Right.
perspective,
Mhm.
because our perspective not only makes everything either horrible or bearable, but it also is the primary uh, m- method by which our behavior is modulated. So, if our perspective is one that we're being victimized, then we're going to
Mhm.
behave accordingly.
I get
If
very.
our perspective is one that we're not being victimized, then we're going to behave a very different way.
Mhm. Exactly.
Yep, I totally agree with that. I mean, that's like in alignment with what I truly believe. Again, here's another thing: beliefs, right? Beliefs. Do we need them? Are they necessary? I mean, what's your thought on beliefs?
Hey, I think we started with that back whenever my first visit with you guys was, and
Uh-huh.
and I have since I was about the age of 10 or 11, have been trying to let go of every belief I had for the very reason that that I mean, that I realized that almost every belief I had was either distorted or just plain wrong. And uh, and what I have come to a sort of a sense of peace and equanimity with is the concept that beliefs are consciousness structures that we cannot get rid of, but we can realize that they are
Frameworks, yeah.
transient and let them go as they need to be
Mhm.
let go.
Yeah.
Um, and they are ways in which we weigh and measure um, ideas that come through and so forth. But a belief is typically an idea that about something that we do not have knowledge, and it is something that we typically will invest some degree of emotional charge in, a commitment to, in an idea that could be completely upside down and backwards, and most of the time they are. And this is a all of our. This is why people have, so many millions of people have been killed by other people in religious wars and so forth.
Mhm.
And and we see right now in our political system that this same thing is in play. Um, and and so uh, we can, if we realize that beliefs, which are natural ways of processing and evaluating information.
Klein, we have a question.
Sure.
Sarah wants to know, how do you know our soul chooses our parents? Our souls choose our parents.
Well, first of all, I don't know it. It is information that I have been guided to in the way that I just indicated a few minutes ago
Mhm.
in respect to myself. What I am, what I have uh, been, the guidance I've been given on that question is that souls choose their parents once they get to a relative soul age, and it's somewhere in the early to middle stage young is when they start choosing their parents.
Mhm.
Um, Prior to that, uh, either it's a roll of the dice or it's some committee, in the etheric realms making the choice for the souls. And but once they get to a certain level, and it's not against their will, it's just it's like when you're a kindergarten student or a first grade student, you
Mhm.
have less agency to choose what your course of study will be than you do when you're a junior or senior in high school. Same principle.
Mhm.
And so
Oh, I love that analogy. Oh, or yeah.
well,
And
yeah, I mean
that is an excellent way of looking of internalizing
right. You
for me.
just have less experience based, for the choice. So it's not you're putting the things against your will. You're uh,
Exactly.
you're ceding your choice to others who are more knowledgeable than you. And then as you gather experience, you start making the choice yourself.
Hmm.
And the further along that you get, the more you are involved and completely in charge of the choice.
So to Sarah who asked the question, in previous weeks we've discussed the Michael teachings,
Mm-hmm.
and that discusses that's ways for you to find out your soul age. So that's what Tom's referring to
Right.
right now, is a lot of young souls or baby souls don't have the experience, if you will, to be choosing so much. But
Mm-hmm.
as you get older, you get much more selective in choosing your experiences and who your parents are.
Right.
Uh, It deeply resonates with me. You know, I've had the Michael reading and stuff, and the answers that came back all deeply resonated with me. Like you, I don't know anything, but there are also a lot of there's other authors that speak to the same thing besides Michael. It's not just Michael that talks about we choose our parents.
Right. No, this is a widespread widespread teaching. It's not limited to Michael by
And
any
it was
means.
an incredibly freeing one for me to experience years and years ago, because I simultaneously came into that knowing and understanding I chose my parents and my children chose me as well. And I came into that understanding simultaneously, and it really was a game changer for me and
Well, you
how
know,
I showed up to life.
I find it just as interesting from the standpoint of children as I do from the standpoint of parents, because and I know you've had the I don't Sandy, I don't know about you, but I know but Tammy's had some very very positive experiences with her children and grandchildren and so forth, and one can only feel and I have had very much the same type of thing, um, and, uh, and it's a very gratifying experience to feel that you are blessed to have children choose you as a parent or grandparent in a way that makes that pleases you. You know, in other words, it's of course this is. I mean, there are plenty of you love the kids whether they're successful or not,
Yep.
whether they have this issue or that issue or don't. Um, but
Yes.
but the fact that it's just it's what I have found is that uh, is that the when you apply the choice downstream instead of upstream,
Mm,
it's just as significant in a personal way.
yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. It's saying like it's just as significant to hold the space for your children also chose you just as you chose
Correct.
your parents.
Yeah, that they chose you.
Very, very powerful. And I know
Yeah,
for me, if we were to drop all the spiritual conversation, and if it was just common knowledge on this planet today,
right.
that we're all evolving, everybody's at different levels, and this is just how it is. You have chosen your parents and your children have chose you. The honor that we would show up for those relationships would be so much different. I've experienced it in my own life after coming into that understanding and looking at things that way.
That's exactly right. You know,
It's beautiful.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Tammy, because that is one of the freeing aspects
Oh, it's
of
so
being aware of the fact that you're engaged in this. And so as a for instance, you know, I mentioned that I had this experience at 10 or 11 that was so liberating for me. One of the liberating aspects of it was that I didn't have to be angry at my mother as you
yeah,
know, she could still make me angry,
yeah.
but but I didn't have to blame her for being a victim of her, you
Mhm,
know, which would be the primary reason, you know. I could see that she had behaviors that made me angry,
mhm.
but but I could also have great respect for her as a human being, notwithstanding her faults and all that, in
Yeah,
ways that were almost impossible to have perception of when I was perceiving myself as a victim.
exactly.
So it's a very uh, liberating concept. Some psychiatrists say it borders on you know, some sort of delusion, but you know, they can figure that out. I'm not going to worry with that.
Well, they can figure that out all they want, but like I said, I think it's amazing though, because as I said, if you took if you were to take the language of spirituality and all of the caveats and nuances that has. And you just, if there was just a knowledge on the planet, whether it's true or not, but let's just say it was true and it was public knowledge.
Right.
It wouldn't even be the same planet. We wouldn't because for me, the ability to keep my heart chakra just so open and really in that knowledge that it feels very authentic to me, and the experiences that I've had in the 20 plus years since coming into that it resonates deeply with me to be as close to a truth that I think I could possibly conceive being here on planet Earth and trying to understand how and we got here and why. But that all being said, there's something amazing about not being the victim. And so many self-help people will tell you that on so many categories. But if you didn't apply it to any other category other than you chose your parents and they did not do anything to you, and you know what I mean? Just that alone, I can't even fathom what the planet would be like today.
Well, let me say one thing in favor of victimhood here for just a minute.
Please be in favor.
The victimhood is a step beyond, so almost every perception we can have, almost every conscious awareness we can have, is a level of growth, is a level of evolution, of development, and it has value. And being a victim is a step beyond being downtrodden and being abused and not realizing that you even matter at all.
Exactly.
And a lot of people are in that category, and
step up.
And so being a victim is a way of shouting out, hey, I'm being abused and I matter, And so I don't want to disenfranchise the importance of that at all.
No, I didn't mean to.
No, I know.
At all, because I grew up in a really abusive household, so I didn't mean it that way. But I know I carry.
But it is liberating to get beyond that. That's my point.
It really is, and I just feel like I carried that childhood with me, and on some levels, I'm sure I still do. I've released so much of it, but I carried it with me in a very heavy way, up until that realization. And it was a game changer in my life. I mean, big game changer for me. So we can move on. I just thought I'd hang around there a little while.
Yeah. So, these are developmental events, and I have been guided by.
Tom, when you say guided, can we go in that? What does guided mean to you? And where are you getting this guidance, do you believe?
Did you say legally?
No, I said not legally. I said when you refer to what you were guided or you got guidance, what can you explain what that means to you? And what?
Well, it's a good question. I wish I had as precise an answer as the question is posed. But all I know is when I was very young, I was getting guidance of the nature that I've described. And so but I had a sense of having from an early age, and it was already to some degree developed at age 3. I had a sense of being accompanied, not being alone. And when I was young and was interested in church, I was interested in church because I thought that's where you could go and connect directly with spirit. I didn't realize at the time that the church was a place where you were designed not to connect with spirit.
Stop.
It was to be, taught to you, but you weren't to connect with it directly. But in any event, I was blessed to have from an early age a sense of connection with non-physical presences that I deemed alive, and uh, uh, and I and so these were, whether they were voices in my head or just ideas that came through that seemed like they came from some source outside myself. I interpreted it as guidance, and um, I, I I give you another example. When I was third grade, um, my my third grade teacher came in one day in 1950, says the spring of '53, and
Kill me.
excuse me.
I said, you kill me how you can just
Oh,
remember
okay.
that for
I was 8 years old, and she came in, and I was in an all boys school, and she said, "The boys, um, we starting this morning when we say our Pledge of Allegiance, we're gonna add the words under God between one nation and indivisible." And I think I'd not been more angry in my life to that moment before that moment occurred. And it's interesting what can inspire anger in an 8-year old, uh, but I was just outraged at the whole idea, and and vowed immediately that I would never ever include those words in my recitation of the Pledge of Allegiance, and and so and being a third grader, I thought, well, maybe and being and we it was explained that Congress had come down with this and so forth, and that's why we were making the change, and and of course this was during the McCarthy era when Senator Joe McCarthy was finding communists everywhere who were known to be godless people and all that. So
Mhm.
we had to we had to bring in God and all that, and so I thought perhaps that if I could get a movement up among my fellow students to resist, and that would relieve us from having to go through the indignity of adding this to our daily recitation of the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. And so during the course of that day, I polled every single other kid in the class, and it was that was as much of a learning experience as the reaction that I had, because what I discovered was I was the only one who noticed. And even when you brought it to the attention of others, that what a terrible abuse of power this was, they didn't care. And so it was really fascinating to me. And so I went to the teacher at the end of the day. Her name was Mrs. Bennett, and I said, "Miss Bennett, after this was after everybody else had left the classroom, around 3:15 in the afternoon." And I said, I was and I was really angry. And I said, "Miss Bennett, why did Congress do that?" And she said, "Do what?" I said, "Why do they add those words under God?" And she could see I was angry, and so she gave me some latitude, and uh, and so uh, she didn't want to answer. She says, "I don't know, Tom." And I said, "Well, I know why they did it. They're trying to make it look like the United States is better than other countries because of some relationship with God. And that's not how it works. That's completely wrong." And and so she said, "Well, I can see how that makes sense." And I said, well, they should not be allowed to do that. And but I can't stop them. I know, but I will. I want to let you know that I will never, ever, ever say those words ever in my life. And she's, I have to say what her response was for that time, because that was a time of great repression based on the McCarthy stuff going on. And this is when the House Un-American Activities Committee was ruining people's lives because of they had been to some meeting of promoting communism 20 years earlier and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so she said, instead of saying, well, you have to, she said, well, given the way you feel about it, I think that's the right decision for you to make, which was very brave of her to say. If it had been reported that
That
she
she
had
had
said
said
that,
that.
she might have
Yeah,
lost her job.
exactly.
So, so anyway, we
Wow,
have
the
these.
McCarthy era sounds like a modern day witch hunt back in the 50s.
It was very much so, but a little bit different from the witch hunts we've been hearing about lately. A little bit different from the Trump witch hunt.
Oh, I was going, what? I missed something.
Oh, yeah, we're having a modern day witch hunt right now.
We are?
Yes, we always have
Are
them.
we missing somebody? What's going on?
No, I mean, if you think about it, there is always a witch hunt going on through
Oh,
it,
yeah,
just
I
keeps
know.
repeating itself over and over and over again. For somebody's beliefs, and this one group doesn't believe that that's right. There again, we got the beliefs going on, and we get these modern day witch hunts going one after another.
Well, okay, so we can't change everything. So, anyways, Tom, all right. So I'm sorry. We went from witch hunts to
Yeah, I'm going to try to stay away from politics here because
yeah.
I know Sandy's down there in Florida where things are different. I don't want to create any rift between her and me.
I don't play in the politics field. That's not
Okay.
that's not anything I even play in. So
All right.
I would, in fact, it was funny. When I was really young and I was going to college, I was going to be a poli sci major, and I wanted to be a politician. And I hooked up with Connie Sue Gibson, who was running for some office in Tennessee. And when I see how she talked to people and did other actions, that's when I decided I couldn't be a politician.
Mm-hmm.
I witnessed it firsthand, and I realized that the truth there's no truth in politics, right? Like there was just, for me personally, what I was witnessing was there was no truth. They will tell you one thing and do something else behind your back. So I was like, oh, nope, I'm out of there. So politics is not a thing for me, not since the 80s. Went out, done with it.
Yeah.
So
Anyway,
you can talk about it all you want.
No, I'm going to stay away from it.
So I'm glad you clarified what guidance was, and I wanted you to clarify that because I think people get guidance and they don't even realize they're getting it. That's why I like to have that's why I like understanding what that means to somebody. So, thank you for sharing what that meant.
Well, in my own case, I think people get it all the time. And I think our society is one which is very materialistic and very prone to negate the validity of anything that's not physical or in nature or physically based. And so the kinds of things that were from my personal experience and perspective, the most important elements of my developmental period, and continue to be important today, are things that I think occur all the time with people, and they simply tend to discount them or negate them because our culture is favors doing that, which I think is a big mistake.
Yeah, as do I.
I mean, I had a very when I was just after my 16th birthday, I had a very profound near-death like out-of-body experience, and that was
This is one of
life-changing.
my favorites.
Yeah, in its own right, but it was and it was life altering because it was so significant in a way. And
Tell us about that one a little bit. Do you mind?
no, I don't mind telling you about it. It was, but it is something that I may not have time to get into in great detail this evening, but we can do it later if you want. But typically, as a being a let me how shall I phrase this? It's a good example of the fact that no experience is too trivial to trigger a spiritual awakening.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, the spiritual awakening that occurred with me was triggered by the fact that I had developed a crush on my best friend's girlfriend, and and uh, and was managing it perfectly well until she, behind his back, started coming on to me. And that then created a sort of a double bind crisis for me. And and I did and so as I've written the story up, and in my writing I said I was having an existential experience of the 16-year-old kind, and where this seemed like a life or death crisis at the time. And um, because my code of honor prevented me reciprocating. But my but in any event, it was I was caught in this trap of desire and morals and all this sort of thing, and didn't it was not well equipped to handle it. And so one night in June of 1960, my friend and I were used to the friend who had the girlfriend. Were used to padding around together. We used to laugh and joke that together we made one credible character because he was a real jock type and fullback on the football team and so forth. And so he could go knock on girls' doors, and then once he got in, I could carry a conversation. And I didn't have the nerve to knock on the door without him. And so anyway, we went out together one night, and when his girlfriend was out of town, and and we we came back, and he was spending the night at my house, and so this was right in the thick of this moral crisis, and we got back to my house probably around midnight, and he was staying. We had I had There were twin beds in my house, one across the room from each other, and in my bedroom, and so I was tossing and turning and unable to sleep, and kept on looking at the clock, which was on a table between the two, and it was getting on to 1, 2, 3. Finally, it was around 3:30, and I was getting more and more uh, just in a state of despair, and I was seeing my life as this of just slogging through just piles of shit. That's what it was in my mind, and so in the typical fashion, deep shit with low shoes, and so and so anyway, um, it was not pleasurable to look forward to, and uh, and and I was at some point in that process, I became aware that I was wish I didn't exist, and I was not suicidal per se, but I just wish I'd never been born, and so somewhere along the way in that it was right around 3:30 in the morning, and all of a sudden there was a tornado-like energetic vortex. It was down at my just at the upper edge of my solar plexus, and all of a sudden my consciousness was pulled from my body, and I was first hovering over my body, and then I was pulled through the ceiling, and then I was pulled through the roof of the house, and then I was pulled up in the sky over the city, uh, and I was looking down at the loom of light of the city, and then I was seeing the East Coast, and I was going up, 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 and I was up into at some point several hundred miles in space, 200 or 300 miles. I don't know how far it was because I had no way to measure it, and it was a really beautiful, beautiful sight. I could look out over the Atlantic and see the line of daylight halfway across the ocean, and or however far it was out, and I could see the loom of the cities along the East Coast. I could look at it and see in the space and see all sorts of things that were incredibly beautiful. This was, again, put this in perspective. It was June of 1960. There had not been any U.S. space shots at that point in time. The only thing there had been was Sputnik from the Soviet Union. And we had no real shots from space. So I had no basis for comparison of what I was seeing versus what we might get from a satellite or something like that. And but it was very, very beautiful. And I inquired to myself, is this something, wow, I'm a few hundred miles above the Earth. I see the planet down there. I see it's round and all that. Uh, and should I be afraid? And the answer immediately came back, no, because you don't have a body, therefore there's nothing to protect. There's just this consciousness and this pair of eyes, non-physical eyes, that allows you to see all this. And so no need to be afraid. And so I said, great. And so I was looking all around and really enjoying the view. And the next thing I knew, there was a sort of a pop, like the pop of a of a bubble out of the top of a long neck beer bottle.
Yeah.
Like a and and
Yeah.
and and when that happened, space disappeared. All Earth disappeared. All frames of reference disappeared. I was in what seemed initially like total utter blackness, darkness, or whatever it was. And so, but it did not seem the least bit threatening. It just seemed different. And and so I thought, well, this is different. And I asked again, is this something to be afraid of? No, no, nothing at all. And so I started trying to maybe get my bearings as if I had anything to get bearings on. And after I thought, well, maybe in my non-physical eyes there are rods and cones, and now that I'm in darkness, they'll adjust, and I'll be able to see a little something, even though there's nothing to see, and because I'm clearly in some different realm, and so after a while, there was with that intention, things started to clear up, and I was able to see that I seemed to be represented by some dots of light that were sort of blinking on and off. And I thought, well, if this is me, I wonder if there's anything else around here like that. And off in the distance, it seemed like in every direction I could see a little dot here and a little dot there, and so forth. And so I spoke is anybody there? And as soon as I did that, there was this convergence of light that came from all directions around me,
Mm.
and 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 converged around me. And there were uh, I don't know how many. It seemed like about 40 or
Mm.
so presences immediately around me, uh, and and so I don't. I said something like, uh, "Where am I?" And there was an answer. They were all speaking together in this chorus of voices speaking in unison, and the answer was, "You are in a place that is no place." Um, in other words, not physically, not a. And I asked what that meant, and I got an explanation. And I said, "Well, who are you?" And they said, "Well, we are your spirit guides." And I said, "What the heck is that? I never heard of spirit guides." And
Mm.
so they started giving me an explanation of that, uh, and and how that. Uh, yeah, I mean, it was a very beautiful explanation. I don't have have it the writing in front of me, but it was quite elegant, uh, and how souls oftentimes will dedicate themselves to helping those in the physical get through their lives, and that's what they were doing. I was their I was their job basically, which was hard for me to grasp on the one hand, but on the other hand, it was completely consistent with the fact that I had felt I'd been getting guidance all my life,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, and so they then went,
You have an army of it, Tom.
huh?
I said you have a small army of it. 40 of it.
Oh,
That's
yeah. I think
you
this.
have a small
I
army.
think that's not the. I think that's not the usual number, but they were kind of converging to give me a hit over the head with a cosmic 2x4, and so um, yeah, I think that was this was a special occasion, if you will. But I think we all have access to large numbers
Mm-hmm.
as and when we need them,
Mm-hmm.
even though our normal number may be three or four or five or six or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. So anyway, uh, that that event uh, uh, was quite moving for me, and they gave me a little lesson in how the system works, and how we have multiple lifetimes, and how the soul is involved in all of our stuff. And it was a quite a it took me a long time to process it, but it was something that made a profound impression. And um, and so and they even said, and they expressed great concern that I was being self-destructive, and I was very much in denial about that. Oh, no, no, you got me wrong. I was just thinking I didn't want to be alive. Wasn't I was thinking of killing myself, things like that. And they gave me a lesson in the fact that 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 you could do that. It was okay. There was no judgment or retribution involved, but it didn't really solve a lot, because you would have to come back and do the same lesson plan all over again as
Mm-hmm.
many times as it might take to get past that. And so they said from that standpoint it would be a bit of a waste of time,
Mm-hmm.
which as a 16-year-old I certainly didn't want to waste any time. And so uh, anyway, it was quite a, a pretty amazing thing for me. And they said, and they said, by the way, in terms of your current crisis, if you can, this was a Saturday, and they said, if you can make it till Monday, the crisis will be gone. And I said, well, oh, great. How will that happen? They said, well, you don't need to know that now, but when the time is right, you'll know. And which over time, I heard that was the line that I heard from them probably more than any other. That was repeated many, many times when I asked more questions than they wanted to answer. But uh, and what happened on Monday was that I by a fluke that came to be on Monday afternoon, I had a blind date arranged for me Monday night, and and fell head over heels in love with the girl that I had a blind date with, and that ended the whole
That
crisis.
ended everything. It wasn't a problem anymore.
Yeah, right. I mean, it
That's
was
wonderful.
just.
Oh wow.
And so, and one of the interesting things was the next morning uh, at breakfast, my friend, uh, who in my story I named called him Truck. As I say, he was a football the he was the fullback on the football team. He's a real jock type, um, and so he says, "Hey, Tom," he says, "were you having some kind of weird dream last night?" And I said, and I when I had come back from this experience, I had gone from a state of absolute despair to a state of ecstasy. When I got back, I came back into the body. It was around 5 minutes to 4. I've been out for about 25 minutes, and there was a sense of the same sense of like you have in a falling dream, except that in this case, I knew where I was falling. I was falling back into my body.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got back in, there was this sense of great compression and confinement in ways that I'd not been accustomed to being aware of before. Um, but I had this state of ecstasy that came with me as a result of this, and I knew that it was something I could not share um, with anyone. And my mother was mentally ill. My father was a psychiatrist, and so there was no framework within which either one of them could understand this except as some sort of psychotic break from their perspective.
Right.
And I did not interpret it that way at all.
Yeah.
And so anyway, the following morning, and I went off
Hey,
to sleep and
real
slept.
quick, besides intellectual, like besides mentally having the memory and all that and feeling ecstasy, what was the predominant feeling, or was there one while you were out there? Was there a predominant feeling that you can even equate to the feelings we experience here?
Well, I would say the 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 feeling was one of being nurtured and loved.
Mm,
Um, the the thought, and it's being a Gemini and
yeah.
being mostly in my head, it's hard to even say what feelings are. But um, the but the feeling was definitely the feeling. This uh, my friend PMH Atwater, who is the most prodigious writer on near death experiences in the world, uh, talks about this is the kind of experience many people have in NDEs, and
Mm,
and they speak of it as the loving dark zone or whatever.
yeah.
Um, and it was completely supportive, completely nurturing, and the sense of love even before these beings showed up. But when they showed up, these I say these beings, these intelligences, whatever they were, um, when they showed up, then there was just it was being as if you were being held,
Mhm.
and it was an absolutely wonderful feeling, and
Oh,
um, and their presence remains with me to this day. It's just at a greater level of awareness than I had before, and for many years there was an active dialogue going on between us. It's not so active today as it used to be, although sometimes it's still engaged. And um, but in that following morning, my friend was asking, "Did you have some sort of a weird dream?" And I said, "Well," and I'd already resolved I was not going to be able to share this with anyone at all.
Mhm.
And this is again, it was 61 years ago this month,
Mhm.
and that it happened. And so I said no, and he said, "Well, you were talking in your sleep," and I said, "Well, I talk in my sleep all the time, no big deal." He said, "Well, this was different." I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, he says you woke me up talking in your sleep right around 3:30," and he says, "And I sat and listened to you for the next 25 minutes talking in your sleep, and it was just you were having a it was as if I were listening to one end of a telephone conversation. You were talking on one end, somebody else was talking on the other end. You would wait, and then you'd say something, then they'd say something. I couldn't hear them; I could only hear you." I said, "Well, okay, so what?" He says, "Well, here was the interesting or unusual part." He says, "You were not speaking English." And he says, "You were speaking a language that I've never heard anything like before." He says, I can, I'm familiar with, I took 3 years of Latin. I've taken German. I've taken a little bit of French. I've traveled all over Europe. I know what the languages in Europe sound like. This didn't sound like any language I've ever heard in my life. Nothing at all. But you were just as fluent in this language as you are in English this morning. And so he says, "Tell me what was going on last night." So I was thinking, I tried to come up with something that would shut the conversation down and be honest at the same time. And so I said, "Well, truck, I went beyond death last night and I came back." He says, "Oh my God, Coach." He says, "I don't want to hear any more. Please, that's the end of it. I don't want to hear more."
Oh,
But from my standpoint, that's exactly what had
I
happened.
think yeah, it sounds very much like the experience people
Yeah, I
have.
mean, because
Death
what I was
experiences.
treated to was not was information about about the fact that life is continuous; it never ends,
Hmm.
and that the physical birth and death of individual bodies is just are just tiny little moments in the eternal life of the soul and the consciousness that animates those bodies, and that part of us is eternal. It's forever,
Hmm.
and uh, and so that was what I meant by my response to him, even though it was not something that I wanted
Really.
to go into further.
Ah, yeah. Just forever and forever. It just never. I don't know. The grasp of it never ever. We never die. I
Well,
don't.
forever is for yeah. These are hard concepts.
They're very hard.
Eternal is outside of time.
Hmm.
Whereas when we talk about ever and forever and all that, that's sort of semi
Eternal. Yeah.
halfway one, halfway not. But
Okay. So we've got about 5 more minutes before we wrap up the show. Thank you for sharing all that with us tonight.
sure,
Um, I would love to have you come back and go through some of your readings sometimes of the things you've
I'd be
written.
willing to do that.
That would be really wonderful.
I have a question,
Yeah, I was just
Tammy.
going to ask you.
May I take a quick break? I need to take about a 2 minute break, if that's all right. You all can.
Oh,
Okay.
okay, that's
Uh,
fine. Go
My
ahead.
biology has
Go
limitations.
ahead. Yep.
Yes.
Uh,
So,
sorry, Sandy. Yeah,
so
back.
I know you've had multiple conversations with Tom about his life and his experiences, and I know he has children. I wonder what his children feel about him and his experiences and what he's gone through in life. Has he ever mentioned that to you?
Yeah, I think you ought to chat with him about it. I think it's different, and I think it'd be great to have Tom back and have him read. He's written about his experiences in a beautiful way that wouldn't take long to read, but it would cover everything, and it explains a lot about the different relationships and soul relationships between him and his children, and they're all different today. There's some really interesting stuff in regards to his children, though.
Oh, I'm so interested in that.
Huh?
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
really interested in that. I'd like to know, um, because it's very interesting that, again, uh, we feel one way about our life, and then our children could totally be on a different wavelength, or, they don't understand exactly why we choose to walk down this path.
Mm-hmm.
So I would be curious about how he dealt with that.
I don't think he's gotten any massive resistance.
Oh, that's great.
um,
I have,
oh, there he is. Hi, Tom.
Hey,
We only
sorry
have a
about
couple
that.
minutes left, and Sandy has a quick question for you.
So I was asking Tammy, since took a biological break.
Right.
I was asking her what your kids, because you have children, right?
Yes.
So what were your children's thoughts of you in your walk of path? How did they accept you for what you've experienced this lifetime, and what is true for you?
How, you mean, had they experienced me being such a weird character? Is that what you asked?
Yes,
Yes,
that's
basically,
essentially what
yes.
she's asking. Yeah.
I think they have done a good job of accepting my eccentricities. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
they have uh, they have each of them. I have three children. Each of them has the two daughters and one son, and they have not had the degree of anomalous experiences that I've had, but they have had enough, or been exposed to me enough to have a degree of appreciation for the validity of these kinds of experiences, and at least as they relate to me, and even if they may not be as open to them themselves as I am in my own case,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, and uh, so that I think they've accepted them perfectly well.
All of their lives, they've accepted them perfectly well.
Yeah, I would say
That's
so.
great.
Yeah, I
That is
mean it
really
was.
great.
Yeah, I mean when my older children, I've got uh, a daughter and a son by my first wife, and a daughter by my second wife, and and the older children were not as exposed uh, to this when they were young as my second daughter, but but nevertheless they've always been completely open to my perspective,
Mm-hmm.
That's
and
beautiful.
so
Very, very beautiful. I'm glad to hear that.
yeah, I mean, and in terms of my guides, they played an active role for me in terms of advice about health, advice about um, they introduced me to my first wife, um, and
Don't tell everything.
I mean, I'm just saying that it's been it was quite a, some people who are aware of these kinds of interactions look at it and say, "Gee, that you were really uh, sort of manipulated and blah, blah, blah. I don't look at it that way at all. I look at their interactions with me as something that we have sort of co-created.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because of my sense of my own sense of free will choice in the whole process, which has been one of the most important aspects of guidance that I've always been given. That is that everything we do is based on that.
Mm-hmm.
No matter how unaware of it we may be.
That's awesome. Well, we have run over in time again, as usual. That's just our little concept here. We love to run over the time. I want to thank everybody that joined us this evening, and I want to thank Tom for taking time out of your holiday weekend to spend
Beach
it
week.
here with us. It was such an honor to have you again,
Well, I'm glad to be here.
So thankful. And and Tammy, you are just amazing. You're getting just this vibrant energy going every week, and thank you so much for being on camera.
Thank you so much for being behind the scenes doing what you're doing down there in Florida.
Now, Sandy, are you ever going to come out from behind that raven, or are you just going to be the raven forever on there?
I'm the raven forever.
Okay.
I made a promise to myself a long time ago that, I don't mind doing radio or anything like that, podcast. I believe, though, that I just didn't want my face all over the internet, and my face is not on the internet anywhere. So good luck trying to find it.
Well, I'm not even on Facebook, so,
But you're on the internet.
Yeah. Right.
Okay, I'm happy we're all here co-creating together. Yeah,
Right.
Lovely Saturday evening. Tom, thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me.
For joining in. Oh, yes, I want to have you back. I really want to have you back to go over the more of your story, and possibly even just do something with you reading some of it. I would think it would be enjoyable to hear you actually read some of it too. So I hope
as I think both of you know, I think I mentioned it whenever the last time I was on. My brother passed away recently, and there were some things that came up for me in the framework of that experience. And he and I were very, very close, and there are some things that came up for me that I think would be potentially worthwhile to share in terms of the postmortem communications on the one hand, but also in the context of some of the framework in which some of the grieving occurred. And I'd be happy to share that. I think it might be useful for people to to sometimes in a way to reframe some of the grieving they go through when they lose a loved one. Because I don't think the experiences I had with losing him were really any different than people have all the time when they lose a sibling or a spouse or parent.
Wow. Speaking of death, next week's guest is going to be Sandra Dawn, and she communicates to spirit on the other side that has crossed over. So we are looking forward to having her on here, and we will have Tom back on here because he's a pleasure. I just love his sense of humor and his, he's got a pair. That's all I got to say. So with that, we're going to end the show tonight. I want to thank everybody for joining us here again for Raising Vibration and Journey into Consciousness. I am your host, Reverend Raven. Good night, everybody. You guys go ahead and say good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.